So, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be having a look now at the consumable side of the business. So, obviously there are a lot of different materials out there. We're going to try and cover the main basic materials, well, the most commonly used materials, give you a few little hints and tips about it, and then also show you a little bit of information about some of the newer products that we will have coming along as well. So the materials we're going to be covering are the trolleys, wood, acrylic, have a quick look at the new products, and of course question answers. So if you do have any general material processing questions, then do ask away. Myself and Marion will do our best to answer those. And yeah, hopefully everyone will pick something up about this. So we'll move on to our first material group, which is the trolleys products. So I'll hand over to Marion, who will give you a bit more information about this product.
Thanks, Alex. So the trolleys material is a very interesting material. It's very versatile. It's used in many applications, like general signage, labeling, industrial signage, sports and trophies. It's basically a two-ply material made of a modified acrylic core known as PMMA and coated with a micron-thin colored film. So when you actually laser engrave the material, the laser will take away the top surface of the material and to reveal the different color core. So you end up with two contrasting colors, and because the film is very thin, you can achieve like a really high degree of detail. So if you've got like an intricate logo or very fine lettering, you don't lose detail by using this material. Also, the advantage of using this is that you don't need to paint fill the material, so it's really time saving, and also there's like no mess involved. Now, because it's not pure acrylic, it's less prone to cracking and shattering than pure acrylic, and it's more flexible as well, especially on the thinner gauges, the 0.8 to 1.6. So if you want to wrap around, a curved surface, you can achieve that, which is, can be obviously a bit difficult with just pure cast acrylic. Now, trolleys has been specifically designed for the demand of laser cutting and engraving, and it's produced by Trotec in our manufacturing facility in North Carolina. So when choosing a material for a laser application, it might be a bit obvious, but it's quite important that you actually check that the material that you're using is suitable for laser engraving. And the reason I'm saying this is because on the market, there are other types of material, sort of like mainly ABS type of material that are used for mechanical engraving. And these products are not suitable for laser cutting and engraving. So they look very similar in appearance, but if you try to process them on a laser, what you will end up with is very sticky edges at best. The material will melt and the engraving probably won't be consistent. So please check before you use it with a laser. In our catalog and the web shop, the materials are clearly identified as suitable for laser or mechanical engraving. And if you're not sure, by all means, just ask, one of us in the materials team will be able to advise you what's best to use for your application. So trolleys comes in 30 different colors. Today we're going to use a metallic finish. We do have two types of metallic finishes available in the range: the Trolleys Metallic, which is suitable for interior use, and the Trolleys Metallic Plus, which is suitable for exterior use. The metallic finishes are really interesting because it's a great alternative to using metals. So first of all, it's much lighter in weight. They won't tarnish, so there won't be any maintenance required. And I must say the finishes are really realistic. And just a quick point on the UV stability, because that's a question that we often get asked, is, what would happen if I use an indoor grade material outside? Can you tell me how long it will take before the material deteriorates? So basically, in a nutshell, over time, if you use an indoor grade material which is not UV stable, the color will fade. It might even delaminate, and that will depend on a number of factors. So whether the sign or the material is exposed to direct sunlight, it would be the strength of the sun, and whether the material is exposed, directly to the elements. So, again, it's something that you need to check. And just for your information, our Trolleys material is UV stable, and it's guaranteed for a minimum of 2 years. We know it lasts a bit longer, but it's guaranteed for at least 2 years. So the material that we're going to show you today are available in a range of thicknesses. I think Alex is going to use a 1.6 material, but it's also available in anything from 0.5 to 3.2 mil. And when we talk about the thickness, it's actually the thickness of the core that varies. So whether you're using a 1.6 material or a 3.2 material, the top surface remains the same. So your settings for engraving will be the same, but obviously will need to be adjusted when you laser cut the material. So Alex, can you show us how to process the material and maybe share your best practice with us?
Yep, no problem. Thank you very much. So when we work with this material, the main thing to bear in mind is the comment that Marion made at the end, where the actual film, so the top coating of the material, is always the same thickness. So it's a very thin material. And quite often it can be, when we're working with other materials, we can tend to add quite a bit of power for the engraving. However, with Trolleys, all we want to do to get that contrast, or all we need to do to get that contrast, is to remove that upper surface film. So what that means is we don't actually need to use too much power, just use just enough power to get through that surface. And that tends to be the most common issue that I see with customers using this material, especially if you have a glass type laser. You just need to be a bit careful that you're not using too much power, just because it can be a little bit more difficult to control the power with those types of machines. So if we have a quick talk about initially the base setup, we want to use a low air assist pressure. So if you have a compressed air supply to the machine, you want to make sure it's turned down nice and low. There are also different adjusters on the heads, and you can also get different cones that go onto the heads as well to control that airflow. But the main thing is we want to use a low air pressure, and the reason for that is when we engrave the material, we then turn it to a gas. And if you have a high nozzle pressure, what you do is you take that gas and you blow it straight down onto the top of the material, and then it essentially sticks down to the surface and results in a lot of cleaning. So with this material, if you get everything set up right, you really don't need to do much cleaning at all. And again, looking at the focused extraction. So let me just bring the camera and swap it across. See if I can find my mouse first. Here it is. And we'll have a quick look, hopefully inside of the machine, and I can just point out a few of the things that I'm actually talking about. So hopefully you can see nice and easy now inside of the machine. So in terms of the setup on the laser head here, we have the cone, and you can see I have the cone that has the much larger nozzle, so that results in a nice gentle air pressure, but not too much. So here is the smaller cone. And if we have a look at the extraction on the back of the machine, so this is this vent here, you can see that I've actually blocked off all of the area down here because I'm not engraving near there. So there's no point pulling the extraction across here when I'm not engraving in that area. So focusing your extraction, again, makes a big difference in terms of the setup. So I'll now take you back across to the screen again. So 1 second. While I just share the screen again.
So one question that popped up, Alex, was whether the materials were available with an adhesive option, and yes, they are. Most of the material are available with an adhesive option, so all you need to do is ask. But maybe we can also ask you the question, Alex, is can you actually laser cut the material with the adhesive backing already applied on the material?
Yep, so it's a really great feature of laser processing is the ability to do that. What it means is that obviously when you cut out the components, you get that perfect shape and the perfect kind of masking by having that adhesive already on there. So yep, that's completely fine. So if we have a quick talk about the settings we have on here, for the engraving, we're engraving very quickly, and you're just going to vary the power, so you're only just going through the top surface. And the next thing to consider as well is using a Z offset. So what essentially we're going to do is take the laser slightly out of focus, and what that's going to do is give us a slightly wider beam, which means it will be more like a paintbrush versus a fine liner pen, and it will just give us a slightly smoother engraving. So sometimes otherwise you can end up, if you have too much power, you can cause it as well, but striping in the material. So using a little bit of offset helps with that as well. It's also worth noting the engraving direction. So generally I find this material engraves best if you work from the bottom up on this material. So those are the settings, and then we're going to just click go on here, and the machine will be off and running. So let me just, you can see here, obviously the machine's working nice and fast, engraving into the material, and it's going to give us a nice finish. So while that's engraving, I will bring back up the presentation and just have a look at the last few little bits. So the last things to notice is the cleaning side of this material. And to clean the material, you shouldn't be using any special chemicals. So generally what I would use is just a general cloth or a wipe or a microsurface sponge. If, however, you do have some build-up of residue on there, then I would use a chemical called hexane, which is a really good cleaner for the material and doesn't result in any damage. So you can damage the material if you use other cleaners on there, which means obviously it won't be as stable.
Obviously, the one thing to point out is that the Trotec materials being specifically engineered so that it produces like minimal residue to save you a lot of time. So as you'll see, once Alex popped the sample out of the machine, it would have left, you know, a very small amount of dust, which obviously save you a lot of time. It's not always the case in all the materials. We've seen a lot of products on the market, especially the cheaper end of the market, where the manufacturer add a lot of modifiers to the material, and that can cause a lot of like residue post lasering.
So while that's processing in the background, I'll now go on to our next material group, which will be acrylic. But again, if you have any questions about these materials, do ask away throughout this presentation and we can answer that as we go.
So next on the agenda today is acrylic, and probably the question that comes up, you know, very often is, you know, what's the difference between cast acrylic and extruded acrylic, and which one should I use? So basically, in a nutshell, both products are made of the same material to start with, but using two very different manufacturing process: the casting method and the extrusion method. So the products, you know, you end up with have got slightly different properties. So the main feature of the cast acrylic is that we actually laser engrave it. It will produce like a nice white contrasting mark. So whether it's, you know, on a clear acrylic or on a colored acrylic, you'll be able to produce like a nice mark. It's also more resistant to scratches and chemicals. But one thing to bear in mind is that the cast acrylic has a thickness tolerance of plus or minus 10%. So if, say, you're taking a 3 mil sheet of acrylic, it could be, say, 2.8 at one end, 3.2 at the other end. So do bear that in mind, especially if you want to, say, produce materials that need to, pieces that need to interlock, or if you need to slot the material into a profile. The extruded acrylic, however, has like a much lower thickness tolerance. So you know, compared to plus or minus 10% for the cast acrylic, you're looking at plus of 5% on the extruded acrylic. So it's used a lot in general fabrication, and when you need to put like pieces like slot together. Now, when you laser engrave the extruded acrylic, you would only be able to produce a sort of like a grayish mark. So it's not giving you this nice contrast. However, it has like a higher tolerance when like heated or bent, and it's also usually a bit cheaper than the cast acrylic, but it's not available in such a wide range of colors. So at Trotec, we supply both types. We supply the clear options in the cast and extruded acrylic, and we also have like a really wide range of colored acrylic in lots of different finishes. So, you know, the standard colors, but we also have satin finishes, mirror, glitter and pastel colors. So you'll be able to sort of like really experiment with different sort of like textures and finishes and really be quite creative. So I'm going to hand over to Alex, and Alex is going to use the neon acrylic, which is one of the latest addition to the range, sort of like quite bright colors, I hear.
They definitely are. They definitely stand out. And I've made some samples with them recently, and I've had some customers actually, say how they do really stand out and look good.
They do. They're very bright.
One other thing I just thought I'd quickly mention in terms of the processing side of cast versus extruded is sometimes with extruded acrylic, it's a lot easier to get a smoother edge on your cut. But a way you can also tell is sometimes you'll get a sharp lip. So because the sheet has been extruded through a die, there's some stress in the material. And then when you heat it with the laser, you get a little sharp lip on the top and the bottom surface. So sometimes that could be an indicator as well, especially if you've got material that's just been given to you and you're not sure what type it is. That can also be an indicator as well. So if we're talking about acrylic processing, in terms of the engraving, there's not a huge amount we really do in terms of special setup. You can just keep adding power until you start to get that contrast. If you don't want to expose that contrast even more, that's when you need to consider things like inks and other paints to go into the surface. So generally, where the laser hasn't touched the material, it will be essentially sealed, and then the inks and the other additives will stick to where you've engraved. What's normally the focus for acrylic processing is trying to get that really glossy edge to your cut. Now, if we go back from the material side and your settings, the first thing you need to consider is the actual machine that you have access to. So if you have a stepper-based laser system, so something like one of our Rayjet machines, then what you'll find is that due to the actual motion system itself, especially if you're running at higher speeds, you won't be able to get a very smooth edge finish compared to one of our speedy systems, which has a servo and provides that continuously smooth motion for the actual cutting process. So there will be limitations in terms of the actual machine that you have. But from that point, if you've got a machine that has a nice ability to create that good smooth cut finish, then you also need to consider the actual cut setting. So generally, if you cut an acrylic at a high speed, you can still get through it, but you'll start to see kind of lines and striations throughout the edge of the material. And what we need to do is we need to hold that heat there next to the material to give it that very smooth finish. So all you've got to do is just slowly back down the power, but just be aware that you will have the potential for increased flashback. So that's where the beam hits the bed and reflects back. So you may need to consider lifting the material off the bed or potentially adding protection to the rear side of the material as well. So we're going to have a look at some of the neon material, and let me just bring up across into job control again. And so for this, I'm just going to connect back up to the machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut out some lettering. So it's going to be some quite fine, detailed, intricate work, and then also do a bit of engraving as well. So we come across to our job queue over here, and we find the artwork that we want to use. Then we drag that onto the bed, and here we have the setting. So there's nothing that special in terms of the setup for this. What I have done is I have just slowed down the machine a little bit more to give me more of a glossy edge finish. I also use a higher hertz rate, so the pulsing of the laser, we're going to pulse it a little bit faster, and that's going to give us a slightly more continuous heat to the edge and give us smoother cutting. And just to note, if you have a glass type laser, that's actually a fixed, and you can't actually adjust that with that type of process. And then we're also going to have obviously the engraving side for this as well. So I'll just switch the camera back over so we can see into the machine, and then we can have a little look at the material. So it's kind of hard to tell from inside the machine, but it's very bright color. As you've noted, I've removed the protective covering from this area here because we're engraving, so never engrave through the protective coating, but always leave the protective coating on the underside of the material to give some protection when we're cutting it from the actual flashback of the machine itself. And so I'll just bring that up, and then we'll just start this running. But again, working with acrylics is a very fast process. You know, you can run the machine pretty much near its maximum speed. So I've just seen we've got a question here, Marion, and it's asking whether we have any range of kind of environmentally friendly material at all.
Hi, Scott. Hope you're enjoying the webinar. At the minute, we do have an eco-friendly material, which I'll touch upon a bit later on, called Trotec, which is a bit of an alternative to an MDF or a plywood. However, if you're looking for a 2-ply engraving laminate, that's not something that we currently have in the range. It is something that comes up regularly, and we are talking and discussing this with our manufacturing plant. It is quite difficult and to manufacture this without compromising the engraving quality of the material. We were just talking earlier about the minimum amount of residue. So it is something that we will be looking at, but it's not something that we have immediately. But we understand there is a need on the market for this type of product. So we are listening.
Thank you very much. So that has already cut, and I thought also what I have to cover here, I can show you the bit that came out earlier. So all I did was just use a bit of cloth to go over this material, and you can see just how nice and reflective and how easy it is to process. So as you can see, there's no big build up and debris, and that's about having that low air pressure onto the surface and just having just enough power to bring out the contrasting color.
So that looks like the brushed silver on black Trolleys metallic, isn't it, Alex?
Yes, it is.
Really nice reflective finish, yeah.
So while I get this material out, I will just bring up the presentation again. And the final thing I would say as well is that the air assist does matter for the processing of acrylics, especially when you're cutting very thick acrylic. If you do use too much air pressure, what will happen is you actually start to set the edge and you won't let it cool naturally. So if you ever try to cut thicker acrylics and you start to notice that the top edge is slightly frosted, then the chances are you have your air pressure too directed at that edge. So try using a wider cone, but I would always make sure that you do have some air supply at all times, just to protect the optics and give the best service life. So we'll now move on to the final material category, which are the wood products.
Yeah, so thanks, Alex. So the wood is used a lot. Obviously, it's sort of like the engraving wood. It's really nice product to work with. We stock different types of wood. The one that we wanted to focus on this morning is the veneered wood, and this is what Alex will process in a minute. The veneered wood is basically made of two thin layers of solid wood, about 0.5 of a mil, which are sanded and varnished, and each side of a MDF core. So over the years, we've experimented between a sort of like a varnish finish and an oil finish. The oil finish will give you a more natural finish, but what we found was that when you actually come to cutting a lot of, say, small components, it might be a bit trickier to clean. So we've kind of recently reverted back to the varnish finish. It's not like our wood is not highly varnished, so you still get like a really authentic and natural look, but it's that little bit easier to clean once it's been lasered. It's really got like a high quality appearance compared to, say, the plywood or the MDF, and you get some rich finishes. So we supply it in the lighter wood, the maple and birch, and if you want something a bit richer and darker, we do have the cherry, walnut and oak. I must say the cherry is our best seller. I think it's got like this sort of like balance between the richness of the color and sort of like the really nice contrast. If you prefer like a solid wood product, we also can supply it in 5 mil thick. And again, it's really sort of like has like a smooth finish, and it's available in different colors. So we've got maple, cherry, oak, walnut, and alder. And just before I hand back over to Alex, I just wanted to have a quick word about the Trotec product, which I mentioned to Scott earlier on. So the Trotec product is the latest eco-friendly addition to our range. It's made of pure cellulose fiber. It's an alternative to MDF and plywood. It's used a lot in arts and crafts, but it's also great for model making, whether it's architectural model making, because it's very robust. And as I said, it has like a really high quality appearance also compared to the plywood. So Alex, would you like to show us
Yep.
how we process the wood products?
And also, I'll just quickly bring up the screen here. So this is the material that Marion was just mentioning. So this is the Trotec material. The thing I would say about this is it engraves very cleanly. So there's hardly any residue at all. There's barely any cleaning needed to be done onto it. So it's great if you want to then do some inlaying. And the real thing about it is it's so strong compared to MDF. So with MDF, I'm sure you're aware, you get to a certain point and then the material just snaps. Whereas this material is really, I'd say it's probably at least 3 or 4 times stronger. So it's a very strong material. Be great for using things for anything that's more delicate. So if you're doing some jewelry, or again, if you're doing anything that's like model making, you need a material that's a bit stronger. It's really tough and it's really good.
And it's available in 0.8, 1.6, and 3 mil, so quite a range there of thicknesses.
So if we're looking at wood processing, the main thing to initially understand is the fact that obviously generally we're working with a natural material, and what that means is that we will get a lot of variation throughout the grains and the different surfaces of the material, and that can lead to different results. So just be aware that sometimes there will be some differences between every single sheet of material that you're working with. And the other thing is that what we're trying to do is we're heating the wood up, we're then trying to turn it into a gas, and to do that we need quite a lot of energy. So as soon as we turn that to carbon, so as soon as we don't heat it up fast enough, what happens is we end up with very charring, and it's kind of like having charcoal in a fire, and you then need an extreme amount of energy to be able to evaporate that. So what that means is, unfortunately, if you have a very low powered laser, so like a 20 or a 30 watt, then you will find that there will be limitations to the material thickness that you can cut, and just unfortunately you won't be able to cut it. So generally with wood processing, we want to cut it as fast as possible, and we do need some good power. It's kind of 60 watts upwards. That's going to give you quite a lot more flexibility than if you had a 20 or 30 watt machine. So the big difference compared to what we've previously looked at is that we want to use a high air pressure when we are processing wood. So you really want to get that fume and get rid of it from the cut area as quick as possible. And we also want to focus the extraction. So it's all about minimizing the cleaning and just trying to cut it as quickly as possible. In terms of the cleaning, it's very easy. You should be able to just, again, wipe over the material. But if you are doing heavy engraving, then you may want to consider other techniques such as masking the upper surface, engraving through a masking material, and then peeling it off so most of the residue is removed. But it really depends on the product. A lot of our customers may take the product, then either ink fill it or sand it. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And I've just seen a question come in from Laura. And yes, it's the same with acrylics and wood. So you can apply a coating or a masking surface to the top of it to protect it. Whether you need to or not, it may be that if you have a high air pressure that you'll be having problems there. So it'd be interesting to know what you're currently experiencing, where you feel that you may need to mask it. So we'll quickly swap across the camera again, and we'll have a quick look inside of the machine where we're going to be processing some of our material. So I will then get the job set up. So again, we position the laser head where we want the job to start. That's the little crosshairs there. And then just going to take this job, put it back into the queue, and then this is the part we want to cut. snap it to the laser head, and then we'll bring up the settings and quickly discuss the settings. So for engraving, we've actually got two different colors on the drawing. So we've got blues and reds, and this is going to give us two different effects. So with engraving wood, you can either engrave it for depth, in which case you just keep adding power and select the speed that you want. And the other way is you can also add color to the wood. So again, you're taking the laser out of focus so that the laser beams widen. I believe that Brian and Jamie will be going over this as well on the 400, so you'll be able to see it more in depth. But by going out of focus here by 5mm, it's going to give us a slightly different effect on the finish. And then the cutting, we're just going to cut the material as quickly as possible. So I will start that up and just bring this up so you can see the machine working away. So here the machine's in focus and cutting as quickly as possible. So I see we've got another question here. Hi Paul. In terms of the inks and the different colors that I use for the materials, I don't actually use anything specifically. I haven't actually found anything that doesn't really work. So it's really about having a material where you're actually able to remove that kind of initial protective coating, which is what generally happens when you engrave into the acrylics. So I've definitely used oil and acrylic based paints and inks into the material. So it's just a little bit of experimentation, but you shouldn't find anything that really doesn't really work with the process. To see another comment from Laura. So to ensure it's protected, yep. So definitely, if you want to add protection to the material afterwards, then you can just buy a little dispenser, and then you can have a wide roll of tape or protective film, and then just cover up the components once you've actually processed them. So that's fine as well. So while that's processing, again, we'll come back to the presentation, and we'll pass back over to Marion, who'll give us a little bit of information about some of our new products.
Yeah, and just before we move on, of course you can, just a quick point, but of course you can use the different materials together. So I hope that, if you haven't tried, one of the materials, or maybe more than one that we've covered this morning, it gives you the maybe the opportunity to want to try to use them. For example, you can use the wood with the Trolec material, or the acrylic and the wood, and by using different layers of material, I think it can make the sign or the artwork a bit more interesting, but also add value and help you generate a bit more revenue than just a simple sort of sign made of acrylic or wood or Trolec. So there are some great examples on the website. We'll give you all the resources available a bit later on, but there are some tutorials and there's some examples of products that we produce by building different layers together, and Alex would also show you that what we've done this morning is actually a little sign using all these products at the same time. So before we move on to the last part of the webinar and maybe answer some additional questions, I just wanted to let you know about a few new products that we've just released. The latest one being the laser leather. So it's a bit of a tongue twister for me, this one. This is an artificial leather, and it's a two-tone leather. So basically, when you laser engrave this product, it will take away the top surface of the material and reveal another color. It's very interesting, and because it's artificial, you don't get really this sort of like nasty, horrible smell that when you generate when you actually process the real leather. So it comes in 6 different colors. We've got an example here of the black on gold. We've got black on blue, berry on red, silver on red, and really interesting product. You can use it to make bags or labels or all sorts of like art and craft application. So it's suitable, it's very easy to clean, and it comes in 800 by 500 ml sheets. Next is the lasable bottles. We extended our range of bottles. We've got some really nice bright colors in a sort of like a really soft matte finish. And for those of you who like a bit of bling, we've also added a glitter range. So we've got an example here of a pink one, but we've also got silver and gold. The bottles will keep your drink cold or hot, as you wish. And we've also got some mugs and tumblers. It's all available on the web shop. There's no minimum order required, so you can just try a few colors if you wish and see which one your customers prefer and then reorder accordingly. Now the bottles will be on special offer in February, so look out for that. And then the neon and the pastel colors. So neon, we've just processed the orange earlier on. They're just really bright, cheerful colors. I like to call them sort of like highlighter pen colors. They're great to be used on their own or combined with other cast acrylic colors, for example, on a black background. They really pop. And the pastel colors, if you want something a bit softer, we've got like a nice, baby pink and baby blue colors. And the advantage of those, they are matte on one side and gloss on the other. So all these products are available on the web shop, www.engraving-supplies.co.uk. On the website, you've got further tutorials and know-how section that I would highly recommend you can check. You also can find all the technical specifications of the product and some, really great handy tips. We've also got, we like to know what you, how you use your material, what you do with them, and we encourage you to take part in our Instagram competition. We've got a hashtag mytrotecmaterials.co.uk, and if you use a hashtag, you can be entered in a draw to win £100 worth of materials to redeem on the web shop. So please keep sharing. We like to know and to see how creative you can be with our materials.
So I think we've also just had a final few questions here as well, and I'll just have a quick answer these. So when I was talking about inlaying wood, you can engrave in focus to get some depth to the material, and then I'd recommend using our Trotec fins material. So where you're using material that's 0.8 of a millimeter thickness, already has an adhesive backing, and then essentially you can get a stainless steel or copper look inlay with wood. And then the final question was, the machine we're using is a Speedy 300, which is an 80-watt machine.
And I think there's a question from Adam as well. Are you doing rubber later? It's not something, unfortunately, we'll have time to cover today, but maybe next time.
Yeah. Oh, and I think Charlie's muted. We're all facing the technology.
Well, I'd be used to it by now. What I was saying was, thanks, guys. That was really interesting. Really good stuff.
And I just realised I also have the final little combination of the materials as well.
Angle it a bit, Alex, so that, because the camera. That's right. So that's showing how you can use the different materials together.
Yeah, so obviously with the adhesive backing, it just means that it's very quick and easy just to put them together and layer them up.
Lovely. So nice. I guess you could do bedroom name signs for children, or it's not just for commercial kind of applications, lots of other uses for them.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you very much.